I, 29 male, stared at my phone screen for a full 5 minutes, the fluorescent lights of my office buzzing overhead. The text from my fiancé read exactly like this. I gave your mom's heirloom necklace to my sister. You never officially proposed with it anyway. There are moments in life where time simply stops. This was one of them. My mother died of ovarian cancer 3 years ago after a grueling battle. Before she passed, she drafted her will with meticulous care. She explicitly designated a specific piece of jewelry, a vintage platinum necklace featuring a flawless 2-carat sapphire center surrounded by paved diamonds, strictly for my future wife to wear on our wedding day. The piece had been in her family for 3 generations. It wasn't just metal and stone. It was the last physical manifestation of my mother's love. It was recently appraised for insurance purposes at $35,000. I proposed to my fiancé 6 months ago with a high-quality cubic zirconia placeholder ring. The agreement was always transparent. We would design her actual custom ring together, so she would get exactly what she wanted. Shortly after the proposal, I showed her the necklace. I explained its immense emotional significance and the specific conditions of my mother's will. I let her hold it, then I placed it back into its velvet box and locked it inside my biometric safe in my home office. She knew the rules. She knew what it meant. I didn't reply to her text right away. I calmly packed my laptop into my bag, told my supervisor I had an emergency, and drove home in total silence. My heart pounded against my ribs, but my mind was violently analytical. I walked into my house and went straight to my study. The safe was locked. Because electronics can fail, I kept the physical override key hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of The Count of Monte Cristo on the top bookshelf. I pulled the book down. The key was missing. I pressed my thumb to the scanner. The heavy steel door popped open. The velvet box was gone. She didn't just take it on a whim. She had searched my office, found the override key, planned the extraction, and removed it. I pulled my phone out. I didn't scream, and I didn't beg. I typed a 2-word response. I see. Then I called my attorney. I've kept him on retainer since handling my mother's estate. I read him the text word for word. He stopped me before I could even finish my sentence. He explained that under state law, a gift given in contemplation of marriage is conditional. If the marriage does not occur, the asset legally reverts back to the giver. But this was far worse. I hadn't even given it to her. She had bypassed a lock to remove a high-value asset without authorization and transferred it to a third party. That is grand larceny, my attorney said, his tone dead serious. Do not argue with her. Do not demand it back yourself. Call the police immediately. I called the local precinct. Because the stolen property was valued well over the felony threshold, they didn't just send a patrol officer. Within 2 hours, a detective arrived at my house. I showed him the text message, the appraisal documents, and the will. He took photographs of the empty safe, the hollowed-out book, and formally documented my statement. While the detective was still standing in my living room, my phone vibrated. It was my fiancée. She was evidently furious that I wasn't responding to the barrage of texts she sent after my 2-word reply. I answered and put her on speakerphone. Are you ignoring me? She snapped, her tone dripping with entitlement. My sister loves the necklace. It's just sitting in a box anyway. You're being dramatic for no reason. The detective signaled for me to keep her talking. You took a $35,000 heirloom from my locked safe, I said evenly. I'm your future wife, she scoffed. What's yours is mine. If you want to make a big deal out of this, I'm coming over with my parents right now. We need to have a serious talk about your controlling behavior. She hung up abruptly. I looked at the detective. He quietly closed his notepad and crossed his arms. Let them come, he said. 30 minutes later, the front door rattled as my fiancé unlocked it and marched inside. She was flanked by her mother and father. They looked ready for a fight, their faces set in expressions of self-righteous indignation. They stopped dead in their tracks the moment they turned the corner into the living room and saw the detective leaning against the kitchen island, his badge clearly visible on his belt. My fiancé's face dropped. The smugness evaporated instantly. But her father, a man who had never been told no in his life, immediately puffed his chest out and stepped aggressively toward me. "Are you out of your absolute mind?" her father bellowed, pointing a thick finger at my face. "You call the cops on your own fiancé over a piece of jewelry? It was a gift." "It wasn't a gift," I replied, keeping my voice dangerously calm. "It was secured in a locked safe." My fiancée crossed her arms, desperately trying to regain her footing. "It was going to be mine after the wedding anyway. You're just trying to intimidate me because I let my sister borrow it for a few weeks. Tell the cop to leave, right now." The detective stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice, but his authoritative presence commanded the room. "Ma'am, there is a very clear, very strict legal difference between a gift and theft," the detective explained. "Even if he had physically handed you an engagement ring, it is considered a conditional gift under state law. It legally belongs to him until the marriage certificate is signed and filed."
"But he didn't hand this to you."
"You accessed a secured safe without permission. You removed property valued at $35,000, and you transferred that property to a third party. That is not a civil misunderstanding. That is felony grand larceny." The room went dead silent. The heavy reality of the situation crashed down on them. The color completely drained from my fiancé's face. "You're arresting her?" her mother gasped, grabbing her husband's arm. "I am currently investigating a felony," the detective corrected sharply. He turned his gaze back to my fiancé. "I strongly suggest you call your sister right now and have her bring that necklace back to this house immediately. If I have to dispatch officers to her residence to retrieve it, you will both be looking at criminal charges before the sun goes down." My fiancée pulled out her phone, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She dialed her sister. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. She looked up at me, genuine panic finally breaking through her entitlement. "She's not answering." Her father pulled his phone out and aggressively dialed the sister. After 3 rings, she picked up. "Bring the necklace back," he barked into the receiver.
"Right now."
"The police are here." I could hear the sister's voice bleeding through the phone's speaker. It wasn't apologetic. It was frantic and breathless. "I can't," the sister said. "I don't have it." "What do you mean you don't have it?" my fiancé yelled, lunging forward and grabbing her father's phone. "Where is it?" There was a long, suffocating pause on the other end of the line. "I sold it," the sister admitted. The detective immediately reached for the radio on his shoulder. The situation had just escalated from theft to trafficking stolen property. I looked at my fiancé, who was now hyperventilating. But her shock didn't look like genuine surprise at the sale. It looked like the sheer terror of someone whose master plan had just spectacularly imploded. The detective formally seized my fiancé's phone as evidence right there in the living room. That was the exact moment her entitlement morphed into sheer, unadulterated desperation. She started screaming, pointing at me, and claiming I was financially abusive. She yelled that I forced her to do this because I refused to give her a monthly allowance. The detective ignored her theatrics, calmly and formally reading her Miranda rights. Within 48 hours, the real, ugly truth emerged. My fiancé hadn't casually gifted the necklace to her sister. My attorney acquired the preliminary police findings, and the plot twist was staggering. My fiancé was secretly $25,000 in debt from offshore online gambling, a habit she had masterfully hidden from me. She didn't give the necklace away. She colluded with her sister to steal and pawn it. They figured they could blame the sister for losing it, confident that I would just accept the loss because we were engaged. They planned to split the cash to cover the gambling debts. When they realized the police were involved and closing in, the dirty tricks escalated to a horrifying level. My fiancé's defense attorney contacted my employer's HR department, falsely claiming I was under active investigation for severe domestic violence. She hoped I'd be fired, lose my income, and be forced to drop the charges out of financial desperation. HR called me into a meeting and suspended me with pay pending an internal review. She didn't stop there. She filed for an emergency temporary restraining order against me, claiming she feared for her life and needed exclusive occupancy of my house. This was a calculated legal maneuver to force me out of my own property. But my attorney was absolutely ruthless. We attended the emergency ex parte hearing. My attorney presented the initial police report, the text message she sent me, and a sworn affidavit from the detective detailing the grand larceny investigation. The judge saw right through her malicious charade. Not only was the restraining order swiftly denied, but the judge firmly admonished her on the record for attempting to weaponize the family court system. Meanwhile, the detective aggressively tracked down the buyer. The sister hadn't gone to a standard pawn shop. She went to a gray market jeweler in the next county, known for asking no questions. We were terrifyingly close to losing my mother's legacy forever. The jeweler had already popped the 2-carat sapphire out of the antique platinum setting to sell the stone separately. The police executed a search warrant and raided the shop just hours before he planned to melt the platinum down for scrap. The dismantled pieces were recovered, bagged, and locked in an evidence room. My fiancée and her sister were formally indicted by a grand jury 3 months later. The charges handed down were severe: grand larceny in the 3rd degree, conspiracy, and falsifying business records. Her parents showed up at my house one last time. They didn't come to apologize for their daughter's criminal actions. They came to demand I write a formal letter to the district attorney requesting leniency, claiming I was destroying 2 young women's lives over a stupid rock. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just handed them a formal trespass warning drafted by my attorney and coldly informed them that if they ever stepped onto my property again, I would have them arrested for trespassing. The legal process in the United States is intentionally methodical, and it is rarely quick. For 14 agonizing months, my ex-fiancée and her sister dragged out the pre-trial hearings. They exhausted every last dime of their parents' retirement savings on expensive defense attorneys, attempting every delay tactic in the legal playbook. They filed motions to suppress the text messages. They argued the safe wasn't properly secured, but the evidence against them was utterly insurmountable. The prosecution had the initial text message, the biometric safe logs showing exactly when she bypassed the system with a physical key, and the jeweler's security footage clearly showing the sister accepting a massive stack of cash. The district attorney finally offered a plea deal. If they took the case to trial and lost, which was almost guaranteed, they were looking at a mandatory minimum of 2 to 7 years in a state penitentiary. Faced with hard time, their loyalty to each other shattered. They turned on one another like feral animals. My ex-fiancée tried to claim her sister orchestrated the entire heist and stole the key without her knowledge. In retaliation, the sister's attorney produced text messages showing my ex-fiancée explicitly giving her the location of the safe key and the address of the shady jeweler. It was a complete, spectacular implosion of their family unit. Ultimately, they had no choice but to accept the deal. They both pled guilty to felony grand larceny. Because they were technically first-time offenders, the judge spared them physical prison time, but the legal consequences were absolute and life-altering. They each received 5 years of supervised felony probation. They are now officially convicted felons. Neither of them can pass a basic background check for decent corporate employment, and they have already been denied housing applications due to their records. Furthermore, the judge ordered them to jointly pay $4,000 in direct restitution for the damage the jeweler inflicted on the antique platinum setting. But I didn't stop there. My attorney immediately filed a civil suit for defamation per se regarding the false domestic violence claims she formally submitted to my employer. Knowing they couldn't afford another drawn-out trial, we settled out of court for $15,000, effectively bankrupting my ex-fiancé. I submitted the court transcripts and the settlement to my employer. I was fully reinstated at work, and the HR director issued a formal written apology for the suspension. Once the criminal case officially concluded and the appeal window closed, the district attorney released the necklace from the evidence locker. I took the dismantled pieces to a master jeweler who specializes in antique restorations. He spent 6 meticulous weeks painstakingly repairing the platinum prongs and resetting the sapphire. When I finally held it in my hands again, whole, gleaming, and untarnished, the crushing weight of the last year and a half finally lifted off my shoulders. I learned a very harsh, permanent truth about entitlement. People who genuinely believe they deserve what is yours will never feel an ounce of remorse for taking it. They will only feel victimized when you finally stop them. I may have lost a fiancé, but I successfully protected my mother's legacy, my dignity, and my own future. If you want to know how I'm keeping my safe secure these days, or if you just want more stories of highly entitled people meeting the full, unyielding force of the law, hit that subscribe button. It's a whole lot cheaper than a $35,000 mistake.